Hello and welcome to my Specialization Introduction and Outdoor Content Guide for the Feral Druid in World of Warcraft Battle for Azeroth. If you haven't watched the primer video for this series, I recommend that you do that now. There'll be a link in the description below, and watching that will get you caught up onto what we're doing in these videos and why. So we're here on our Feral Druid. We've got our action bars visible and empty. If you go into your talent tree, you can select these talents to fulfill the requirements that are laid out in the primer video. And before we get into our spellbook and start sorting our spells, I wanted to take a minute and talk about forms. As a druid, you have access to several shape-shifting forms. By default, you're going to have whatever race you chose as your druid. That's going to be the form you're just in by default. It can cast some abilities, but some abilities are specific to other shapeshift forms. As a Feral Druid, you have access to 3 different forms. The first one is bear form. Shapeshifting into bear form will turn you into a bear. It will grant you 220% increased armor, 25% increased stamina, protection from polymorph effects, and increased threat generation. This is the form that you're going to use if you want to survive a bunch of damage that's incoming, or if you want to tank some kind of enemy for your group or random people out in the open world. Next, you have the cat form. This will transform you into a cat. It will grant you 40% increased damage to your auto attacks, 30% increased movement speed, protection from polymorph effects, and also reduce the falling damage that you take. This is the form that you're going to be spending the most time in as a Feral Druid. Finally, your last form is travel form. This form is unique in that the creature that you transform into is going to be different based on your environment. If you're in a place where you are able to fly, then you will be able to turn into some sort of flying animal. If you are in a place where you can't fly, you'll turn into a land animal, and if you're in the water, you'll turn into an aquatic animal. All these forms basically give you increased movement speed in that particular environment. So the thing to note when you're setting up your druid and we're putting things onto our action bar is that the entire top action bar here, the side action bar over here, and the short bottom right hand side action bar are shared between all your forms. However, the bottom action bar that will run from 1 to 11 by default is specific to the form that you're in. So if I put this Entangling Roots on my bar, you're going to see if I switch to bear form, it's not there anymore. If I put Growl onto the bear form bar and I go back, you're going to see that Entangling Roots is back and Growl is gone. If I go into cat form now, neither one of those abilities is there. Finally, if I go to travel form, you'll see Entangling Roots. This is because your travel form and your regular form do share an action bar. But as far as cat and bear goes, they have their entirely separate action bars, so you're going to want to make sure that you're putting the abilities that are usable in each of the different forms onto the appropriate action bar. So with that out of the way, let's get into our spell book and start sorting our spells. Now, I'm not going to get really in-depth on any of these, but I am going to give you a brief description of the ability so you know what it does and you can understand why we're putting it in the category that we are. So first off, we have Dash. This will activate cat form, give you a burst of speed for 10 seconds. So that's a combat utility ability. We have Entangling Roots. This will root the target in place. Damage taken can cancel the effect. That's a crowd control ability. Ferocious Bite is part of our core rotation for cat form. Growl is an ability that we can use in bear form. It is a taunt, and for the bear and cat forms, we're going to be putting specific abilities for them on this bar as much as possible. So we're going to put Growl down here on the far end of the bear ability bar because we're probably not going to use it very often in open world content. Hibernate is a crowd control ability. It will put a target to sleep, but it only works on beast and dragonkin, so it kind of has limited use. Maim is a cat form ability that we can use. We're going to put that down here. We'll talk about that later. Mangle is an ability for bear form. Moonfire is usable in bear form, but it's also usable in your default form. Moonfire will do a little bit of damage to the target, and then also add a damage over time debuff that will deal damage over 16 seconds to the target. Prowl will put you in cat form and put you into stealth until you cancel it, so you can sneak around, get by enemies. Rake is part of our core rotation for cats. Rebirth is a combat utility ability that we're probably not going to use often in the open world. It allows us to resurrect a friendly target while we're in combat. Regrowth is a combat utility ability that will heal us for a large amount initially, and then also place a heal over time buff on us that will continue to heal us. Rejuvenation we're getting from a talent that we currently have, so we're going to ignore that. Remove Corruption is a combat utility ability we're probably not going to use very often. It will remove curse and poison effects from a friendly target. Revive will let us resurrect a friendly character, but we can only use it out of combat. That'll go in our miscellaneous section. Rip is part of our core rotation for cat form. Shred is part of our core rotation. Skull Bash is our interrupt ability. It's usable in cat form and bear form. We'll charge to the target and interrupt their spell cast. Soothe is a combat utility ability we're probably not going to use very often. It will remove an Enrage Infect from a target. Stampeding Roar is a movement speed cooldown that we have that will increase our movement speed as well as that of any friendly targets around us for 60%. Survival Instinct is a damage reduction cooldown that will go in our defensive cooldown section. Swiftmen we're getting from a talent, so we're going to ignore it. Swipe is part of our core rotation in cat form. Teleport Moonglade will teleport us to the Moonglade. It's kind of the headquarters of the Druid. We can use that outside of combat. Thrash is part of our core rotation for the Feral Druid. Tiger's Fury is a sort of offensive cooldown we can use as the Feral Druid. And then finally, Wild Growth we are getting from a talent, so we're going to ignore that as well. Now we're going to double check and make sure, see if there's anything we can use in bear form that we might have missed. There's Swipe, and we can use Thrash in bear form. Already got that. Our Shred, we're good, 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 good. I think that was everything. Yes. Okay. So, now that we have got our spells sorted out, let's talk about the resources available to the Feral Druid. Now, your resources will change based on the form that you're in, so we'll go over the resources for your other forms. If you are in travel form or if you are in your default form, then you will have mana available to you to cast spells. You'll almost never be in this form, so don't worry about it too much. If you are in bear form, you have rage as your resource. You start off with no rage. You build up rage by dealing damage or taking damage or using abilities. Then you spend it on abilities. You can figure that out on your own time. What we really want to focus on is our resources in our cat form. So this is the form we're mainly going to be fighting in. There are two resources available to it. You have energy. You start combat with 100 energy. You spend it on abilities and it will passively regenerate. The abilities that you spend energy on a lot of times will give you your second resource, which is combo points. You start combat with 0 combat points and you are able to build up to 5. You spend your combo points to deal finishing moves that usually have an increased effect based on the number of combo points you spend. So, you start with energy, you spend it. You build up combo points, you spend those on finishing moves. While you're doing that, your energy regenerates, and you start the cycle all over again. So let's take a look at the basic rotation, the core rotation of the Feral Druid. So we're going to want to start combat by spending some of that energy we have. We're going to do that by opening up with Rake. Rake will cause the target, it'll deal some bleed damage to the target, then add a damage over time debuff to the target in the form of a bleed that will continue to deal damage for 15 seconds. It also reduces the target movement speed, And if you use Rake while you're stealth, it will stun the target and deal 100% increased damage. Rake also awards 1 combo point. After we cast Rake on the target and we have our bleeds going, we're going to want to keep spending energy, keep generating combo points, and we could do that one of 2 ways. If we are fighting a single target, we can use Shred. Shred will deal damage. It deals increased damage to targets that are bleeding, so because we're opening up with Rake, our Shred should always be dealing 20% increased damage. And if we use Shred from Stealth, then it will deal 50% increased damage and have double the chance to critically strike. This ability will also generate a combo point. If we're fighting multiple enemies, we can cast Swipe. Swipe will deal physical damage to all nearby enemies. It will deal 20% increased damage to bleeding targets, so we'll get that buff from having our Rake on the targets that are bleeding. And it awards 1 combo point. Now, you may say to yourself, well, how are we going to get all those enemies to bleed with just Rake? Well, instead of casting Rake on multiple targets, we can use Thrash. Thrash will deal damage to all nearby enemies. Then it will also apply a bleed to those enemies, and it will award a combo point. So it's kind of like the area of effect version of Rake. It does less damage, but it hits all the targets around you. So you can Thrash and then Swipe. So as we're building up these combo points, we need something to spend them on. We have 3 abilities that will utilize combo points. These are our finishing moves. So the one we have over here to the side is called Maim. This costs 35 energy. It will use 1, 2, 5 combo points. Has a 20-second cooldown. It does physical damage and stuns the target. So if you cast this with 1 combo point, you will get 75 damage and a 1-second stun. If you cast it with 5 points, you get 375 damage and 5-second stun. So this is more of a kind of CC crowd control ability. You won't use this one very often in the open world because most of the time you just need to kill your target, not stun your target. So that's why we put it over here. The main finishing moves you're going to be using are Rip and Ferocious Bite. Rip is an ability that will use 1 to 5 combo points to cause a bleed on the target. If you have 1 point when you use it, you'll do 528 damage. If you have 5 points, you're going to do 2,640 damage. The important thing here is that the duration of Rip is the same. It lasts 24 seconds. So once you have Rip on a target, you can almost guarantee that you're going to have a bleed on that target, even if you don't Rake or Thrash in order to get that bleed on. The other ability is Ferocious Bite. 25 energy. It will consume 1 to 5 combo points to deal damage to a target. At 1 point, it will deal 237 damage. At 5 points, it will deal 1,183. There are a couple little extra bits in here. If you have 25 additional energy available, Ferocious Bite will consume up to that much. So if you have 5, it'll consume 5. If you have 25, it'll consume 25. If you have 50, it'll consume 25. So it'll consume up to 25 energy to deal up to 100% additional damage. So if you have the energy available when you cast Ferocious Bite, you can deal double damage based on how many combo points you are spending. Also, if you use Ferocious Bite on targets that have less than 25% health remaining, Ferocious Bite will also refresh the duration of Rip, which is our other finisher move here as well. So, let's see this in action. So we're going to go up. Let's pretend we're fighting a single target, right? We're going to go up. We're going to cast our Rake. That's going to generate a combo point for us. Then we're going to want to spin or generate more combo points, so we'll cast Shred against a single target. When we're at 5 combo points, we're going to want to cast Rip. That's going to put a bleed on the target. Then we're going to build back up to 5 combo points, making sure that our target still has our Rake bleed on. And once we hit 5 combo points, we're going to cast Ferocious Bite and deal a bunch of damage right there. Now, let's go to the multiple target scenario. We can run up, we can do Thrash. So now that Thrash bleed is on there, and we can start casting Swipe until we get to 5 combo points. Then on our primary target, we can do Rip and then go back and do Ferocious Bite, or we can just go straight into Ferocious Bite and try to mow down that target so we could focus on a new target. And that is it. Now I know there's some graphics up here around the character, and that's coming from the passive abilities that we have in our spellbook. So we're going to talk about those next. So we have Feline Swiftness. This gives us 15% increased movement speed. We have Feral Instinct. This reduces the chance enemies have to detect you while Prowl is active, so it makes our stealth a better stealth. We have Infected Wounds. Rake, which is our ability here we're using against single targets, causes an infected wound in the target, reducing their movement speed by 20% for 12 seconds, which we covered. It's there in the text. Mastery Razor Claws. This increases damage done by our bleed abilities. So our Rake, our Thrash, and our Rip. Omen of Clarity is one of the abilities you were seeing there. Your auto attacks have a chance to cause a clear casting state, making your next Shred, Thrash, or Swipe cost no energy. So if we go up and we just start auto attacking, we're going to see eventually this is going to trigger. There it goes. We get this graphic on the side of our character, and it means our next, any one of these 3 is going to be free. So we can Shred for totally free. We use no energy. We can do it again. There we go. We can Swipe for free. We can Thrash for free. And that's what that ability does. It lets us get a lot more damage in and not be as reliant on our energy in order to output that damage. Next, we have Predatory Swiftness. Your finishing moves have a 20% chance per combo point to make your next Regrowth or Entangling Roots instant, free, and castable in all forms. So what we want to do with this passive ability is we want to build up to our 5 combo points, execute a combo, and then our Regrowth is totally free and instant cast. So we can hit that, heal ourselves, put a heal over time on ourselves, and then that is going to help us with our survivability. It's going to help us in between our enemies to stay full up on our health, so there's no downtime. And then finally we have Primal Fury. When you critically strike with an attack that generates a combo point, you will gain an additional combo point. Damage over time cannot trigger this effect, so it's only on the initial damage that's done by our abilities, but this will let us build up those combo points a lot faster, which means we can get our Rips on and go straight into our Ferocious Bite a lot faster, or if we're attacking a bunch of enemies at the same time, we can Ferocious Bite multiple times in quick succession. Okay. So that is the rotation for the Feral Druid. So the next step is to jump into our talent tree and create a build that's going to work well in open world content. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so okay, so this is the build that I recommend that you use in outdoor content. It's definitely not the only build that you can use, but it's the one I recommend, enjoy, and will be showcasing at the end of this video. So we're going to go into each talent, talk about what it does, and why it's part of the build. So first off, we have Blood Scent. Your melee abilities in cat form, which is basically all of our abilities that we're using, have a 10% increased critical strike chance on targets with a bleed effect. Now this is important because in cat form we cast our Rake or our Thrash. Our targets have bleeds automatically, so this is basically just 10% increased critical strike chance. That ties into our Primal Fury, where when we critically strike with an attack that generates a combo point, we can gain an additional combo point. So our critical strikes hit harder, and we can get increased combo points and deal more damage. Next up, we have Renewal. You could honestly pick any of these talents and that would be fine. I like to have Renewal even though it has a 1.5 minute cooldown. I put this in my defensive cooldowns, and what this does is it will instantly heal you for 30% of your maximum health, and you can use it in any shapeshift form. So if for some reason you do get into a really bad situation, you kind of have an oh crap button to push. And that has come in handy on the Feral Druid in the past, but if you're not running into that problem, then you can feel free. I would recommend taking Wild Charge for the versatility there, but that's entirely up to you. Next, we have Restoration Affinity. This tier, you could honestly take any of these and be perfectly fine. If you take the Balance Affinity, you're really only worried about the passive. Increase the range of all your abilities by 3 yards. With the Guardian, you will reduce all damage taken by 6%, plus the Frenzied Regeneration ability is nice for a heal. But I am choosing the Restoration Affinity because this will heal you for 3% of your maximum health every 5 seconds. If you're at full health, then it'll heal one of your party or raid members that are nearby instead. So it's just nice to have that passive regeneration of your health so you can decrease downtime between enemies. You're going to kill things really fast, so you just want to keep on moving and keep on moving, and eventually if you're doing that, your health is going to get down pretty low. You're going to have to stop, you're going to have to heal. Having this Restoration Affinity will help with that. I don't even really care about the other abilities that you learn, the Rejuvenation, Swiftman, Wild Growth. You can incorporate those if you like to. I really am only picking this for the health regeneration. Next up, we have Mighty Bash. This goes down in our crowd control. This gives us a 5-second stun that we can use in all shapeshift forms with a 50-second cooldown, so a nice little crowd control ability. Then we have Jagged Wounds, your Rip, Rake, and Thrash. Those are all of our bleed abilities. Deal their full damage 20% faster. So what this means is that instead of taking 24 seconds to deal our full damage for Rip, it now takes 19.2. So all that bleed damage gets packed into a much shorter time span, and this is good because when we're out there in open world content, our enemies aren't going to live for that long. So it's nice being able to get all the damage from our abilities since we're spending our resources on them packed into that small amount of time, and just do increased damage that way. Next, we have Sabertooth. Ferocious Bite deals 20% increased damage and always refreshes the duration of Rip. Now, this is nice just for the 20% increased damage on Ferocious Bite, because that is a finishing move that deals a significant amount of damage to the target, but on targets that are going to take longer to kill, then you know that you can always have your Rip refreshed by Ferocious Bite. So once you get Rip onto your target, you can totally ignore that button now and just focus on Ferocious Bites, because that will continually keep Rip up. That'll keep the bleed up. That'll give you your 20% damage bonus on your other abilities. And it's just a nice kind of quality of life improvement on top of having 20% increased damage to one of your main finishing moves. And then finally, Moment of Clarity. Omen of Clarity, which is our ability that our auto attacks have a chance to make our next Shred, Thrash, or Swipe cost no energy. That will now trigger 50% more often, can accumulate up to 2 charges, and it will increase the damage of our next Shred, Thrash, or Swipe, which is the ability that can be free, by 15%. It also increases our maximum energy by 30. So this is really just going to help us with our energy management. We'll be able to get those free cast abilities a lot more often. They'll hit harder when we do get them, and then we just have 30 more energy in general to work with. So all in all, this doesn't change the way that we play the build. It just increases what we do passively. So let's run through the rotation one more time. And we can see here, we'll show off how Ferocious Bite will refresh the duration of Rip. So we're going to Rake. We're going to build up to our 5 combo points. We'll put Rip on, so we'll see Rips right there. We're going to build back up to our 5 combo points. And now, pay attention to Rip. We're going to Ferocious Bite, and it's going to renew the duration, refresh the duration of Rip on our target. So now we can just build right back up to our 5 combo points, Ferocious Bite again, and keep Rip on the target. Alright. That's it. That's the build. That's the rotation. So next, let's take a look at the PvP talents in case you want to toggle War Mode on and then focus on PvE. First off, I recommend you take Relentless. This will replace your Honorable Medallion, turn it into a passive ability that you can set and forget, and it gives you 20% reduced duration of any crowd control effects on you. Next is King of the Jungle. For every enemy you have Rip active on, your damage and movement speed is increased by 3%. This will stack up to 3 times. So if you're facing a single target, you put Rip on them right away, and this is just 3% increased damage. If you're facing a couple enemies, then you can put Rip on one, target another one, Rip on that one, target another one, Rip on that one, and now you have 9% increased damage. This is actually pretty easy to manage out in the open world. So this is just anywhere from 3 to 9% increased damage at all times, on top of some movement speed increase if you do happen to need it. But hopefully your targets are just dead and the movement speed doesn't really matter. Next we have Fresh Wound, Rake. Rip is the finisher. So a little bit harder to implement, but it lasts for a long time, so you can still get that up on multiple targets. Rake, however, which is our ability here, has 60% increased critical strike chance if used on a target that doesn't already have Rake active. So it's almost a guaranteed critical, combined with the fact that we have our Blood Scent giving us another 10% as well. So we're looking at about 70% critical strike chance on top of whatever else we have. So pretty much always a critical. And that's going to generate an extra combo point for us as well. So that's going to help us ramp up into our first finishing move a lot faster. And then finally, Savage Momentum, interrupting a spell with Skull Bash, which is our ability here, will reset the cooldown of Tiger's Fury. Now, Tiger's Fury is an offensive ability, 30-second cooldown. You can use this as often as you like. It will give you 50 energy and increase the damage of all your attacks by 15% for their full duration. So it's a nice DPS increase. And with this, you can use Tiger's Fury, target a casting enemy, use your Skull Bash, refresh the cooldown or reset the cooldown of Tiger's Fury and cast it again and just kind of go to town. So those are the PvP talents I recommend you take if you want to toggle on War Mode and focus on PvE. Now the next thing to do is to take this build out into the open world and see how it does against different types of enemies. So I'm going to cut to that and I'll see you there. Okay, so we're here in Suramar City, and we're just going to fly down and try out this build against a couple different types of enemies. So we're going to want to get into our cat form in stealth, and we can come up to our target. We can cast our Rake and stun them, go into our Shred, start building up our combo points. And as you can see there, we killed him off pretty quick. We'll go back into stealth. Do the same thing. Now something to note is that your combo points do transfer from one enemy to the other. So we have 5 combo points right now. So we can go over to this guy, we can cast Rip, we can go straight into a Ferocious Bite. We got multiple targets, so we'll Thrash, we'll go into Swipe, we're down to a single target. Oh, we acquired some more here, so we'll Thrash again. We're going to Swipe. We've got our combo points, so we're just going to start using Ferocious Bite to deal some damage here. We've got our free regrowth, so we're going to use that. That's why we want to build up to those 5 combo points. Use that, get our regrowth in there again. So in this case, we're going to want to target the enemy that has the least amount of health, if possible, so that we can get that damage off of us. Alright, now we're down to this single target here. So we got our Rake. We're going to cast Rip. We're going to go into Shred, build up those combo points again, and use this on a nice Ferocious Bite and kill him off. And we've got our free regrowth there. So that got a little bit chaotic, but it did help to show off kind of how the build's going to work. This guy could see through stealth, so we're just going to Rip on him. Shred. We've got 3 combo points, so this is what I was trying to show earlier. With those 3 combo points, we can go back into stealth. We can come up to this guy. Rip, we're already at 4. Shred, and we can just ferocious bite if we want to. A lot of times, if you're facing an enemy that doesn't have a lot of health, it's not worth going through the entire rotation where you rip all the way, build your combo points to rip, and then start all over and build them up to ferocious bite. So like this guy doesn't have a lot of health, so we will rake. We've already got our combo points, so I'll just use this on a ferocious bite because I know he's not going to last long enough for rip to deal a lot of damage. This guy, on the other hand, has quite a bit of health, so I will go ahead and cast rake. I'll build up to my 5 combo points. I will put rip on him and then build back up to 5 combo points and then cast ferocious bite. Build back up. We want to make sure we keep our rake on him. And we're going to ferocious bite again. Okay. Another AoE situation here, so we're going to thrash. We're going to start swiping. We got our combo points, so ferocious bite and kill that guy. We can go ahead and keep on swiping here. That guy's dead. We're up to 5 combo points. Cast our ferocious bite. Cast a shred to finish him off. And easy peasy. Alright, so now we'll go up here and we will show off what to do against a rare spawn or an elite. It's pretty much going to be about the same. Alright, so let's see if we can go ahead and... We got to remember to keep casting these regrowths whenever we can to keep our health up. And you can see there's good reason for having the resto affinity to keep our health up as well. If we ever do need to, we can always just hop out of cat form, cast regrowth, go back in. So let's go into Prowl. We're going to go up. We're going to get that rake with the stun. Go into Shred, put our rip on there. Shred our way back up to 6 combo points. And we can use our regrowth, make sure we got that in there, and cast our combo, our ferocious bite, and then we have another regrowth to use. So that's really what you want to do. Build up to 5 combo points, use either rip or ferocious bite. Make sure you hit your free regrowth, and then build back up to 5 points and just cast another finishing move. So it's pretty straightforward, pretty powerful build. And I hope that this has helped you gain a better understanding of the Feral Druid, and that you have the confidence now to get on your own Feral Druid, get out there in the open world, start trying it out, see if it's a specialization you'd like to play in Battle for Azeroth. If you like the video, thumbs up, subscribe, whatever you want to do to keep encouraging me to make these kinds of videos. And I hope you have a good time in Battle for Azeroth, and thank you for watching.